Okay. This is Diva, delivered, inspired, victorious, anointed. And I have with me Erika Jones, Esquire, and Angellica Sweat. And we are here to discuss this book that, in my opinion, is, I just felt seen. I felt seen and I felt heard. This book by Candice Marie Benbow. I hope you can see it. I hope I'm not holding it up crooked. Um, Red Lip Theology for church girls who've considered tithing to the beauty supply store when Sunday morning isn't enough. Now, there are so many differences between me and Candice Marie Benbow, age being the most obvious. My church girlishness, being a church girl, was not as refined and supported as hers, but it was still there. And that's not the most obvious of the similarities. We have a lot of similarities. I was much too smart and outspoken for the comfort of people around me when I was younger in church spaces like Candice. I lost my mother when she was younger than I am right now, which was way too soon. I love God in a way that allows me to question everything about God. And like Candice, I have loved. I have loved people who refused to love me. I have loved people who used my love against me. I have loved people who looked at my love as something of insufficient value. I was sexually assaulted while at an institution of higher learning, and I too have a master's in divinity. But the main thing I think that connects me and Candice Marie Benbow and every woman who is Black and spiritual and religious and irreligious and sexual and loving and learning and growing and just living is that we are good creation. And almost every facet of society, especially religion, has tried to convince us otherwise. And that is why this book is important. So I want to just jump right in, and I want to start with this quote. Uh, so that's how I come to this. This is not the quote yet. I'm sorry. So this is how I come to the discussion of this book and the content and the context of this book. And the quote that I want to start right out with, because it's so deep to me and it covers everything. So much of Western Christianity is rooted in the subjugation of women. Can we just talk about that for just a minute? Most of Western Christianity is rooted in the subjugation of women.
I'll defer to Angellica.
So I actually was going to defer to Erica, but I think Western Christianity and specifically was never designed to uphold women, whether it was white women, black women, women of color. Um, just just its roots and its foundation was based upon a patriarchy. So with that being the case, I mean, I saw that quote and I definitely was like, yeah, that hit the nail on the head, right? Because nobody talks about the basis of religion, not only objectifying women's bodies, but also decentering our voices.
Mm.
You think about how many you hear the Bible stories, right? And we can name all of these great men. They have this whole 42 generation lineage in the New Testament. And then you get to the women, and we can count them on one hand who are known by name. And I say by name because there are those women within the Bible who are known based upon their bodies. And if you take that into account, the fact that if we're not known by name, we're known by our bodies, and it's always or most likely, except for the exception of Elizabeth and Mary, who are known by name, it's in a negative connotation. But that's the faith, right? That's Christianity at its root and its core. So if we don't discuss anything else, we have to be able to push the envelope and say, what do you do with a religion who doesn't support all creation as being equal and good?
Yeah,
So
yeah. Yeah, it goes back. I mean, my husband and I were having this little kind of like mock discussion outside, right? While he was doing some woodwork. And he was asking me, well, what makes you say that? What makes that quote so good? And I started with, well, let's look at Adam and Eve. Well, let's look at David and Bathsheba. And we can just go down the line and everything that has caused humanity to be out of favor with the divine has been, whether rightly so, I don't know, I don't think so, but has been pinned at the feet of women. Like we are the weaker sex, and this is reinforced. It's reinforced in, I have to tell, and I think we've discussed this before. I had a discussion with my son-in-law and told him that at some point in every woman's life, whether it's on a job or in a relationship, a romantic relationship, there comes whether you got to pay your bills, you struggling, you trying to live, there comes a point when we have to make a decision that we will not allow ourselves to be objectified in order to be able to get the things that we need. We have to make that decision. And men never do, because women, we are always forced to apologize for being what we are. Now, that to me is the biggest hypocrisy of all, because who is the only creation that was created from something that was already alive? And what in creation brings forth life other than women? So to label us the weaker sex, the fairer, all of those things, to discount our feelings, our experiences, to even disenfranchise us from the ladders of success, as have been done, is really can be traced back to one thing and one thing only: patriarchy, baby. That's all. We run this, and we gonna make sure that nobody believes that you're capable.
I'll add to that. One thing that came up throughout the book is, Candice talking about how the church shamed her mother, for being a single mother, and how single mothers were treated, but the fathers were never dragged to the altar and made to apologize. It just was kind of accepted. So it was kind of, this burden that was only laid at the feet of the mother, and not what she called the procreation partners. Like they were never pulled into shame for their part in creating children outside of wedlock. But there were so many moments where she talked about how much her mother gave to the church. And I think a lot of times in churches, you have women who are the worker bees, who are doing a lot of the work. But as far as leadership, they just want you to do the work. They don't really want to hear your voice. Exactly. And that's what's so frustrating in the churches, how much of the workload that women, particularly in the Black church, carry, but they don't get, the right to speak or the leadership roles. They're told to still stay in their places. So we just want your work, but not, hear your voice and your perspective.
Wait your turn.
Money. The reality is they want Black women's money. And so if we take our purses, if we take our tithes and our offerings, what's left for especially the Black church to stand on? But so they'll pass a position every now and then. Every now and then, you get one sister that rises, right? But then that's supposed to be representative of us all. It's just like, and Candice does talk about that. She talked about like she was more qualified.
Exactly.
She talked about how I think she could preach better, or she knew her value pretty much in terms of male words. And still, it was always questioned. So,
Angellica, you and I have had this conversation. Angellica and I, as theologians, as educated preachers, and dynamic, both of us, and I will say it, because I'm through with that trying to play small to make other people feel good. I know I'm a good preacher, and it's not because of me, it's because of God, everything that God put inside me. But there are other male counterparts that are the same good preachers. Nothing, they're not bad preachers, but because they're men, there is scaffolding to help them climb. But for women, there is not. When I announced that Angellica would be the first in my series of women speakers, in my Sister Speak series, I'm sitting in the church where everybody but three people are women. And then after I say, let's face it, some people don't like women preachers, and this is why I'm doing this, and I've been in ministry for 20 years, blah, blah, blah. Then a man gets up behind me and says, don't worry, fellas, we'll have our day.
Can't have nothing.
And the thing about that is, that's okay, that's acceptable. It's haha, that's funny. But the thing about it is, I have decided and I've realized that, and this is why Candice's work is so important to me, because it gives voice to these things that I did not know how to articulate. Especially the questioning part. Being able to question God, being able to ask, why doesn't this make sense to me? And being able to find answers that exist, even though the answers may exist outside of the realm of what we have been told is acceptable and orthodox. But it still is so very important for us to be able to explore, because we cannot ignore the white supremacy and misogyny that just permeate and almost create the foundation for Western Christianity, and whether it's Black or white. So anyway, now I want to hear, I know y'all got some quotes too, because I know that you two ladies would do like me and have your highlighter, and you would be making notes and color-coded messages. So come on, see, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. I love that. So talk to me, what y'all got?
I'll let Erika go. I know she's prepared.
As far as quotes,
questions, whatever you want to discuss about the book, how you find yourself within that text.
so the part that really spoke to me, and I should have flagged this, and was she talked about saying no, and how no was a complete sentence.
Yes.
And you may feel like you owe an explanation, but you really don't. I'm looking for, see, I should have wrote this down. Matter of fact, actually.
It says no is a holy word. I know what you're talking about, yeah.
It's on page 168.
168.
There is power in saying no. Women don't say it enough, and Black women say it even less. Saying yes to everything becomes our reasonable service. American culture teaches men to say no almost without thinking, without a care about who it may harm or hurt. Women consider entirely too many people's feelings to the point of self-sacrifice and self-sabotage. No is a holy word. Our agency is sacred. God honors our agency through free will. We must honor it ourselves. So to me, that really spoke to me, because sometimes it is so hard to say no. Like, there's this persona of Black women as being, superwoman, having to do it all, and we're looking out for everybody but ourselves. And so I just thought that was really powerful about it's a holy word, it's sacred. So taking care of yourself, because you can't pour from an empty vessel. And I think a lot of times us as Black women, we try to do that. And so that was just a reminder to me that no is, that's biblical.
It is.
So refusing to say no is actually outside of his word, his will. And so that was just a powerful reminder to me.
Yeah, I like that. What you got, Jelly?
So Candice and I both, well, she has graduated from Duke Divinity, And I am currently there. And so I really resonated with her entire chapter regarding being Black and being a Black woman in white spaces. One thing in particular, though, that really struck me was she talks about with as it relates to her mother and kind of circling back around to her mother's shame, how she internalized her mother's shame as her own shame. And I think so many times people would prefer for us to internalize their insecurities, their uh, esteem or lack thereof as our internal problems as Black women. And for me, I've kind of been saying lately, like, don't put what's on you on me, right? That was for Candice, that was never her shame to bear. It wasn't even her mother's, that was the
No.
church community shame to bear. But the church put it on her mother. And as a result, Candice took it upon herself. And I think that's something we have to do is begin to give shame back to where it belongs to, and give those type of feelings and insecurities back to where they root from instead of holding them as our own. Because Black women, we hold everything, just like Erika said, like we hold so much. And so being able to put shame back where it belongs is where I kind of resonated a whole lot. Like I got like exclamation points, like yes. Um, just because, and she says this, let's see, she said it would be years before I see the projection behind their doubts about me because others had insecurities about their own lives and unmet goals. And then she goes on to talk about how people, in a later chapter, people live through other people. And so when you don't do what they want you to do, then all of a sudden now you're disappointing because they were trying to live out their goals at your age through you. And just putting shame back where it belongs. And I think she does that throughout the entire book of putting it back and sourcing it back to its actual source. And it's not with individuals, it's more with structures. I think what she's trying to say. Some individuals, though, she does call by name. But that's something that I really resonated with throughout the entire book.
Yeah. I really felt like, for me, like I said, one of her Duke classmates introduced me to her writing. He said, we met at a interchurch thing in Wilmington. He was at the Pumpkin Church in Wilmington, and we did something together, and that's how we met. And we became friends. We started having, coffee, and he said, you would really love the writing of Candice Benbow. So I started, following her on social media, and then she came to UNCW, and I met her at UNCW, and she was so down to earth. But when she stood up there and she spoke and she talked about the different things, like some of the things that she talks about in the book, I felt seen and heard as a questioning Christian. I know what I believe. I know that I believe in God. I believe, but I also believe that God is big enough for other beliefs, not just Christianity. Does that mean I have to stop being who I am? No. Does that mean that other Christians, or that it invalidates what Christianity believes? And I say no. But if you really say that God is omnipotent and omniscient, and God is able to do anything, why cannot God present God's self to a culture that is different than mine in a way that they can understand? And I felt guilty for having those questions. I felt guilty for being a sexual being, as a woman who is a pastor, and I felt guilty about all these things because I felt like I didn't have a right. I didn't have a right to question what I read in the Bible. I didn't have a right, even while I was in seminary. I felt like that was the safe space for questions, but that was it. Once I left there, my questions had to stay there. But by reading this book and by meeting her and listening to her, I got confirmation that being who I am is holy. And it's like, regardless of what other people thought of me, regardless of what other people said about me, regardless of what other people did to me. Me being who I am is holy because God created me to be me. And we are taught by things like people preaching that women are the downfall of mankind because she made the man eat the fruit and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, Jezebel and all these different things. And we get to feeling like we as women are just inherently evil, you know, that there's a level of darkness to us that is, I don't know, designed to trip up the man. You know what I'm saying? And it plays out on jobs. It plays out in church. It plays out in so many different ways. And when we don't acknowledge it, and when we don't really fight against it, we have to. If people didn't fight against, let me back that up. If Black women didn't fight against what is not right and what is not fair, we would still be drinking in separate water fountains, even though I don't want to drink in nobody's water fountain these days. But you know what I'm saying. So I think that it's necessary for us to first acknowledge that this, I don't know, I don't want to say golden thread, this rotten apple exists in the underbelly of our culture, that everything that is wrong is because of women. And when we, just like we got to acknowledge white privilege, just like we got to acknowledge racism, we have to acknowledge these things, because if we are people of faith, then we are people who should speak the truth. And that is a part of what is true.
You're talking about curiosity. That I'm not a theologian, but I did feel like this book gave me permission to ask questions. And so she talked a lot about how her mom would be frustrated when she would ask all these questions. And I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with. Like when you question anything, it's like you're rejecting not just the religion, but that person, because those are their beliefs. And so trying to balance asking those questions, but people not being offended. And so I've had questions about certain things and I couldn't reconcile them. And it's like, well, who do I talk to about this? Because otherwise, it's like, well, that's just crazy talk. And people say, well, the Bible says such and such. It's like, well, is that really what the Bible says? And so people get really crazy when you start questioning their interpretation of the Bible, you know, because if they'll say that's something I learned when I was coming up, and that's pretty much the end of it. And so Candice, you know, rejected that, you know, time and time again, you know, and really went and talked about, you know, different parts of the Bible and what they really meant. And another thing about, you know, we talk so much about, you know, the oppression of Black women in the church, but also one thing that Candice talked about is sometimes that oppression is furthered by other Black women.
Yes.
It's not just, you know, the men in the church, you have other women who are reinforcing, you know, the patriarchy. And she talked about, you know, even just like mentors, like people, women she looked up to, and how they felt like she was moving too quickly, didn't know her place. And they had a problem with the fact that he was thinking outside the box, and that was hurtful to her, you know, because she wanted these people to sort of buy in until she was on the right path. And they're upset because, like, well, why are you getting to this place that it took me 20 years to get to? And so that's something that you don't just see in the church. You see that in all different fields. I mean, I see it all the time. And it's unfortunate, but the church is not exempt from people, women, who are sometimes hesitant to see other women rise because they don't know that it was easier for that next generation, that next crop of people. And so they engage in the same, you know, tactics as men because they feel threatened.
Exactly. And I think that, I'm sorry, go ahead, Angelica.
Oh, no, you go on.
I think that a lot of times what we don't look at is that if you don't love yourself, anything that looks like you is going to get on your nerves. and you are not going to love it. And when you think about the messages that we as Black women are sent every day, our skin is not good enough, our hair is not good enough, our hips are not good enough, our boobs are not good enough, even though if somebody else gets some, then they fine, but not us, you know. And so we're constantly told that we're not good enough. And then you internalize that, but you don't realize that you've internalized it. And the way that it manifests is that you don't want to see other Black women do. Why should you be able to do what I tried to do? Who is you? You rolling up in here, fresh and new, smiling, still believing in everything. What make you think you gonna get further than I did? You see, but it's because of all of the roadblocks and the doors and the things that we have to struggle with, and we don't realize that we internalize it. And my husband is peeping in the door. We internalize it, and then it makes us not love ourselves the way that we should. And we don't, that's why self-care is something that is hard for us, and just loving ourselves. Do y'all know I used to brush my teeth, and for years, I did not look my own self in the eye. And I'm brushing my teeth, but I would not look myself in the eye because I did not like what I saw. And it took me so long to work through all of that and get to the root of it. And just because I got to the root of it, don't mean I was able to pluck the root up. You hear what I'm saying? So it's like we really have to be honest about those things before we can get rid of them. And the church has got to be honest about the things that are not right, that the things that happen sometimes to people, how people are exploited in the church, whether it is financially, whether it is sexually, whether it is just a simple thing as a power dynamic, whatever it is, people can be exploited in the church. And we have to stop allowing money to be, in some cases, a driving force, money to be the thing that motivates us. It can't be that. And I think that when we see God in a way that is inclusive and all-encompassing, then we're able to get to the real truth, because you cannot get to truth outside of a false belief of who and what the divine is.
You made me think of, I think it's Howard Thurman. No, it's not. It's W. Du Bois. He says a lie can never save a soul. And like, in terms of the what Erika was saying, and even what you were saying about the exploitation, I think a lot of that comes. First of all, I think that, and I'm probably gonna get slammed for this later, and that's okay. You find me at Simply Angelica. The church. First of all, the church is a building.
That part.
People, because I was going to say another word, but people come to church.
Yeah.
Okay. So the fact is that the church, like Erika said, the church is not exempt from women or men who are shady, who do things. They were just at home and decided to drive to another location to do it. Right. So that's number one. I think, and sometimes I think people forget, like, you put a cross, a symbol up, and that was supposed to justify your behaviors. And that's not the case. You just drove here and you're driving back home that same hill you were. But with that being said, the exploitation of people, Candice talked about how the first place she recognized her body was becoming a woman was at the church because somebody addressed it. And she didn't name that it was a man or a woman. But I know within my own experiences, it's been women who've been like, you need to go cover up because you're not modest enough. If I'm not, and I used to actually, I wish I could put up a picture. I used to dress so modest, like I did not own pants. I did not wear makeup whatsoever. Lip gloss was it. And some clear mascara at that. And feeling ashamed of my body as it developed its Coke bottle figure, which we bless God for now. But you know, those type of things, but you know what I'm saying? Like those type of things were coming from Black women. They weren't telling me to be proud of who you were becoming. It was more you need to cover up because either it was a distraction if I was in the pulpit, which I kind of understand, but also my body shouldn't be a point of distraction for you. That means you got a discipline problem. It's not a body problem, it's a discipline problem. But to pacify not making people become disciplined in their walk, women are, you know, having to cover up. And then also hearing like even like liturgical dancing, right? Like, oh, you got to wear 4 layers of clothes and pants and dresses and all of that. And so that came from women first. It wasn't a man saying it. I think the first time I heard like from a man was one of my relatives had said to me, "Oh, you getting thick." And I was just like, "Excuse me?"
Mm-hmm.
I was like, "And so are you," because
Yeah.
I was conscious about it, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, "You're getting fat too."
Yeah.
It was Black women first who told me to cover up.
Yeah.
It was Black women who said, if you have cleavage out, that's a problem. If you
Mhm.
have your skirt above your knees, that's a problem. If you have on too much makeup, that's a problem. And it's like, at what point do you say I'm not a problem?
Exactly, because it makes you feel like everything that you are is. It kind of reminds me of this. Y'all know I used to do the whole online dating thing, right? And so this one guy, this was like maybe about 10 years ago, he was a pastor, and he said that he had left his district that he was in because they gave him a woman presiding elder. So, and then I said, well, me being a smart aleck that I am, well, how do you feel about women in the military? Then he goes on to tell me how women are destroying the military. So I just had to stop him as he was going on his tirade and say, you're telling me that everything I am is not satisfactory to you. So let's not waste each other's time. Have a nice day. Be blessed. Away from me.
I
You
have
know?
like a whole one-liner now when I date people. Like, you're gonna know I'm a preacher. I love God. I love trap, and my mouth might be a little reckless. If you can handle all of those at the same time, you might can get my number. But if not, don't waste our time.
Mm-mm. And it's
All of
like,
that.
go ahead, Erica. I'm sorry.
No, I said all of that.
Yeah, I just think that it becomes why do we have to police? You know, why can't you, why you coming to church with that shiny suit on? Huh? Why you got on shiny suit? Why you got on them sparkly hats? You know, what you trying to do? Why you got the little mesh up here? You know?
So there's no accountability. I mean, the problem is it's just generally a lack of accountability
Right.
for men.
Exactly.
And going back to, you know, people are policing bodies in church, that's twofold when it comes from women. I think you have the women who they're trying to police their daughter because they don't want anyone to think anything of their daughter. Mm-hmm. And then you also have the women who are policing other women's bodies because they are scared they probably their own husband is going to be looking.
And they know it.
And they know it. But Erika said it for me.
And so you're worried about what I'm wearing because he can't keep his eyes to himself. So somehow that's become my problem and my responsibility, when that should be something that you fix at your house. And so either way you look at it, the responsibility always seems to come back on the woman. And so we have to police ourselves. You know, they talked about me, even at the beginning, she talked about, you know, red lipstick being extra. So we're always being told not to be too much, not to take up too much space, not to be too loud, too out there, because you don't want to draw attention to yourself. And I'm like, well, why not? You know, why aren't we drawing attention to ourselves? Like, so they want us sort of to shrink ourselves, lessen our voices, and that's not the case. And that's what I really appreciate about the book in general and her perspective.
Yeah, and I think the whole red lipstick thing, because of my complexion, I was always told that I was too black, not too dark. I try to make it sound good now and say too dark. Mm-hmm. I was told I was too black for red lipstick. And so one time I was in a beauty pageant, and they hired somebody to do the makeup, and the girl put red lipstick on me, and I almost cried. And I literally, as soon as she got finished doing the makeup, I wiped my lips off and put something that was more brown. And the way she talked about the red lipstick, that resonated with me. And after I met her, I told y'all that's the first time I bought a tube of red lipstick, was after the day that I saw her at UNCW. I went and bought 2 tubes of red lipstick because it was a part of the journey that I had been on and didn't realize I was on, trying to learn how to love everything that I am. And you know, I'm a lot of stuff, and some of it will give even me a headache. But you know, and I think that we are not taught to love ourselves. Have you ever been told, stop out there, stop being out there being fast, coming in from out there being fast? You know, being fast could be anything. It could just be existing in the body that you exist in, walking the way that your bone structure makes you walk. It could be the way you chewing bubble gum, you know? So what do you do with that? What does that say? What does it do to your psyche when you're constantly hearing that the way you are built, the way you were created is a stumbling block?
I mean, you exhaust yourself if you buy into it.
Yeah.
Because you'll never be able to please everyone. And it doesn't matter. I mean, you could come to church in sweats. There's still going to be somebody who's looking, who's going to see that thing poking. You'll never be able to cover up enough for someone who's wants to look at women. And so
That's true.
you never will. I mean, we've seen people who they were dressed modestly, but you could still see what was underneath. And so we can't put it on that person. I mean, I'm not saying you wear a leotard or, fishnets, but I think way too much emphasis is placed on, our bodies are policed so that we don't make men uncomfortable. And as a result, we're constantly uncomfortable because it's just never enough to fit this standard, ever evolving. And you're never going to be able to please everyone, especially when their standards are unreasonable. And frankly, they're not based in the Bible.
Mm-mm. That's the funniest thing to me. Because somebody well, the Bible say you're not supposed to wear nothing pertaining to a man. I say, didn't everybody back there wear stuff that looked like dresses?
Didn't Paul say that? That ain't Jesus, that ain't God.
And that's the thing. People get Paul and Jesus confused. We are not Paulians. We are Christians.
What you talking about that?
Yeah.
Our picture with Paul and David, but that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, Paul and David, you listen. And I think this is what I love. The other thing that I really, really love about her writing is her language. She could have said she could have given the very same message in very different ways. She could have been very, very formal, but she was very, very natural in the way that she told the story and spoke in a language that we as Black women understand. And so we could connect to what she was saying. At least I could, and I found myself in even in the side chick, because I was an unknowledgeable, unwilling side chick for about 2 months. Listen, when I found out I was outdone, but I didn't know, because we believe that stuff. And I saw myself in the relationship that she had with her mother. You know what I'm saying? And I was able to, a lot of these books that we read, this is definitely not considered a self-help book, but books about our inner selves and our spirituality. The writers, I can never really identify with them. We don't have similar experiences. And I'm not saying that me and Candice Benbow have exactly the same experiences, because of course we don't, but I can see a connectedness between, and not just me, but every other Black woman, every other Black woman who is still, whether you are single or married, just because I'm married now don't mean I wasn't single for all them years that I was single, and being sexually frustrated and being a preacher and not wanting to be out there being a hoe. I hope none of my members don't see this, but I'm just telling the truth, and not wanting to be out there being a hoe, but still wanting to have somebody, but having to be careful, because even if I was a man and a single preacher, the way that people would judge me would be way different because I'm a woman. So I really walked, and I'm sure Angellica, if you want to, you may speak to some of this, but you know what I'm saying? And so I understand her there. I understand how we all want to be loved. Now, I'll be honest, the part about her relationship with her father, while I sympathize, I really couldn't connect to that because my daddy is still a big part of my life. But I know that it shapes your relationships. And she said, I think one of the quotes was, and I should have written it down, but I didn't, was that she had more consistent relationships with men in the church. I think that was it. She said kind of ongoing, as opposed to, as she said, her mother's procreation partner. So I think that all of these things, I could find myself in most of them. And that's what, again, made this book, and the language. It was like, I'm really, and I know she probably thinks I'm a crazy stalker because I've sent her no, seriously, because I've sent her a couple of inbox messages. And one of them was, I saw you on The View. And if people don't know me and I call you and I say, I send you a message and say, I saw you on The View, probably what she thought, well, this heifer thought out that was me on The View. That wasn't me on no View. You know what I'm saying? But I saw that in the future. I saw her on The View in the future, and she was sitting in the middle seat. And she was so excited, and she had on red lipstick, and her hair was, silk, I saw it. And it might not happen, but I think it will, because the book that she has written is something that I think that women will be discussing, because it offers a liberation in your faith that I haven't found anywhere else. So
I'm 28, getting ready to turn 29. And so the liberation that Candice speaks of is something I think I'm living in now. And so even when you were talking, you were like, I don't want my members to think, or I don't want to be out here in these streets and be a hoe. Why is it that females are a hoe? Because they embrace their sexuality.
True that.
You're not a hoe for embracing your sexuality. God created us as sexual beings. Creation is sexual beings. And so the fact is that we have allowed interpretations of the Bible to dictate what happens in our bedrooms. And I recently have connected with a community of believers who are not ashamed to talk about the bedroom. And I must tell you, like, I was like, now what I'm gonna do with this? But just like, you don't expect your pastor or your small group leader to be like, let me tell y'all, like, y'all might need to go take a class, right? And so that was very liberating for me, though, because I think what happens, and I can only speak from my perspective as a heterosexual female, Black female, right? I think we suppress it for so long, or try to be under chastity, or, abstain from sex, or purity challenges, or whatever you want to label it as, that once we do have those encounters, we don't know what to do with them. Because we never discussed it, we never talked about it, and that often leads to people having traumatic first experiences.
Yes.
Because you haven't had that conversation. And so I think one thing I'm growing into and I am embracing is that, like, I'm not trying to be out in these streets. Let me be very clear about that. Let me put that disclaimer somewhere over here. But I do think that conversations are necessary. Like, even when Erika was like, I have questions I can't really ask. Like, for me, I'm like at a point where I'm like, well, I'm just gonna ask it because
Yeah,
the worst you can do is tell me I feel uncomfortable answering.
yeah.
But the Bible doesn't speak to certain things. The Bible didn't have no Adam and Eve other than the one in Genesis, right? Like they didn't have no Adam and Eve story. They didn't have just they didn't even, the Bible barely talked about sex. And when they did, they used covert language talking about like somebody covered up somebody else or uncovered
Yeah,
somebody's feet, like so that means she went in his room or she slid into DMs. Like which one did she do?
exactly, exactly.
And then even like, and this is a sidebar, but just people being like, oh, I want my Boaz. Boaz was like 85. He was collecting.
Y'all, listen, people better
I don't
stop
want
looking for
Boaz.
Boaz because Boaz didn't live long. Okay? He died.
He
Y'all
died. He got that and he died.
see, and that's what I'm saying. People and be like Ruth. Do y'all know that Naomi told Ruth to go out there and put her behind up in the air so Boaz could see her and told her what to do? Naomi was the one that told her to uncover his feet and then he'll tell you what to do. See, people
Naomi
don't do
picked
that.
Ruth out.
And you out there running around talking about you looking for your Boaz. Oh, you looking for an old man that can't do it number once and die. That's what you looking for.
What the people want.
No, ma'am.
But I think that's what came for me. That's what
I don't know. I might erase this part. I ain't though. I ain't gonna erase it.
She creates these conversations about topics that otherwise you could not address. And I appreciate her for that because she does it in a way that does not bring offense to people, right? Where it starts at hinting at the question and unfolding this theology in which we live by. And then she just pretty much tells you like, well, this was my experience. So how do you justify that? Like she even talked about like, how do you, when people were talking about, what was it? Not trauma bonds. What did they call them? Soul ties.
Soul ties.
How do you justify soul ties?
Mm-hmm.
Is it, because the church would say everybody got a soul tie to anybody you come in contact with. Pretty much at this point, you go to Starbucks and have a soul tie.
Yeah.
So I appreciate her for starting those conversations. I think really what churches should do is take the book, read it, and then begin to look at the questions she's asking and really read the Bible for yourself. I think a lot of people have heard the Bible and never have read it for themselves.
And that right there, people are comfortable letting someone else tell them what the Bible says. And if I am not articulate and I'm up there not saying things the way people think or the way people understand, people gonna be wondering why Jesus always looking for the reefer spot. I'll have to tell y'all about that later, but that's really a real situation where somebody thought that somebody said Jesus always looking for the reefer spot when it was Jesus is looking for a church without a spot or wrinkle. So, it's you see what I'm saying? It's about, and that's another thing that Candice really was talking about. When you step into these academic spaces, people automatically assume that if you're Black, you don't know what you're talking about. And that if you're a woman, you stupid. So if you're a woman, you're automatically stupid. If you're a Black woman, then you just there because, affirmative action. And you have no, and she talked about that in those spaces. And now when my seminary experience, as you know, Angelica, was at Hood Theological Seminary, which is historically Black. But my undergrad, I went to UNCW. And when UNCW tells you about the diversity, they really mean that it extends to the edges of their glossy brochures where they show a few people of color. If you'll notice, some of them, they show the same ones over and over. Some of them done graduated and gone on, got children and grandchildren. But anyway, and I understood everywhere I went, people assumed that I didn't belong there. I was too old to be an athlete. So there must have been a reason why I was there other than because I just wanted to learn something like everybody else. I don't know. So these attitudes and things in those academic spaces and then in the Black church spaces, as women, there are also these things. So, and I know, Erika, as an attorney, I know that you probably have just as way more, probably. I was going to say just as many, but I was going to say way more experiences than I do with, being treated that way.
Well, less than 2% of all attorneys are Black women. Less than 2%.
Less than 2%?
Less than 1-2% of all attorneys are Black women. And just so y'all know, today's also National Black Girl Magic Day. So just saying.
Well, this is perfect.
Because I was wondering if you did it on purpose, but there are not that many, Black women attorneys.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I've had experiences where I went into court, to a courthouse, particularly in a more rural area, and I've had to show 3 forms of ID because there's certain rules about what you can take in the courthouse. And if you're an attorney, like, you can't take your phone in some courthouse, but if you're an attorney, you can. So I've had to prove, like, this is my license that matches with my bar card, which matches with my work ID. And I see other people just kind of walk by and kind of flash it really quickly. And they just assume, okay, well, that person probably is an attorney, but her, I'm not sure. So I've had plenty of experiences where people didn't think I was an attorney because I didn't look the way they thought an attorney looked. I didn't fit their mold. And so, unfortunately, a lot of this, you see it in the church, you see it in boardrooms, you see it in the courtroom. It's just something that we deal with as Black women, unfortunately.
Yeah. And it's always assumed that we don't know what we're talking about. Angellica, were you in the classroom when me and that guy had the knock down, drag out argument, and he told me to shut up, and I stood up in his face? Were you in that?
I heard about it.
Yeah, that happened to me at Hood, and the guy, he was from Africa, and I guess culturally, they talked to women that way, but old dude told me to shut up, and I said, who you talking? And I got up out of my seat, and the reason why I got up out of my seat is because the one thing that I do, because I'm only 5'1", so when people start really acting like they finna go with me, they need to know that I'm about that life. So I will stand up and I will walk toward them to let them know that I'm not afraid. But the professor got up and he stood and he said, now calm down, calm down. And after he calmed me down and I sat down, he calmed the other guy down. He started telling him all the reasons why I was right, which of course I liked. But this is the type of thing that we face in spaces like that. And I know that it's no different, like I said, Erika, for you. And so for her to address those things as well, to address the student that was questioning her, what is her theology, that kind of thing, which we get that all the time. What is your theology? What makes you think that God has called you to preach? Because women, there are still women who don't like women preachers because of something that Paul said. And again, Paul is not Jesus, and Paul is not God. And God said, in the last days, I'll pour out my spirit on all flesh, and your sons and daughters shall prophesy. So I'm somebody's daughter. But trust me, I did not wake up one day and say, I don't have anything else to do. I think I'll be a preacher.
And I'll go to seminary. I think I'll take 3 to 4 years of seminary.
Yes, I'll have. And how many hours did we have to have, Angellica? Because we had to have a lot of hours. What was it?
80.
Yeah.
It's not a typical master's program. 80 hours.
80 hours. Yes. And I'm just like, so yeah. And it's just like, but people always assume that we don't know, that we have less authority, that all these things. And I like Candice's boldness when she stands up, because I have found myself, believe it or not, I have found myself apologetic for being like that day when I confronted that guy in the class. I found myself being apologetic, and I did apologize to my professor after that, for being that way. But if I don't stand up for myself, who else is going to stand up for me? I know that as sisters, we should be standing up for each other, but everybody's not there yet. So in the meantime, those of us who are, we got to lift as we climb, you know? And this is what the beauty to me of this book is that she is being vulnerable, she's being honest, she's talking about even things that she probably doesn't want anybody to know, but her vulnerability is, I'm sure, going to help others who want to go to therapy but have thought they didn't know how to approach it because it's not something that is common within our community, and so it's just, to me, the book is, it talks about the mother-daughter dynamic, it talks about the sibling and step-sibling dynamic, it talks about having real friends, people who will say to you, girl, you look a hot mess. You need to do something about this. Look at your skin. I think that right there, that is something that I long for. I long for a group of women who will say to me, Dee Dee, I don't mean no harm, but you need to do something about your hair. It ain't cute. I mean, I think it's cute, but I'm just using that as an example. Having people who are willing to be real with you. And I think that in this day and age, it is easy to just put on a filter. And I don't mean just, on social media. We can put on filters and we can allow people to know the filtered version of us. And I don't want to have a filtered version because I already did that. I had a filtered version of me, and I want to be the me who can look me in the eye every day when I brush my teeth. And so the work that she did gives me the courage to push a little further in the work that I'm trying to do for myself, and to really understand that self-care is more than just having a manicure and a pedicure. It's being able to listen to the type of music that you like in a quiet environment, or eat something that's healthy for you, or whatever it is that helps you feel more comfortable in your own skin. That's self-care. And now that self-care is a popular thing, it's like, oh, I'm gonna get a mani-pedi, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. But sometimes self-care is doing nothing because you're tired and you need to lay your behind down somewhere and take a nap. Somewhere to sit down.
Right, going to bed an hour early is self-care.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I appreciate it when you talk about her being vulnerable. I'm thinking about two H's. So she talked about her, I guess, her hobaticals.
I like that.
Which I was like, whoa. But I appreciated her talking, about that and just being upfront because, she realized that she was a sexual being, and she talked about, looking at porn and toys and all of that stuff. Things you wouldn't usually think you would read about in, a book like this.
Yeah.
But I think, to me, probably the most vulnerable part was when she talked about her mother died, how she thought that she hated God.
Yes.
And like, even reading that, she said, like, I was like, ouch. She said some people probably they knew I was crazy, and that was the proof for her kind of walking through why she felt that way. And then she realized it wasn't hate, she was just very hurt by what had happened by taking her mother. But some people, you can never say something like that. It's just not even allowed for you to even think it. It's for her to put it in a book, I thought was very courageous of her, because sometimes things do happen. You like, come on, like what's really good? But she put it out there how she really felt, and I got it. And I think a lot of other people probably got it. And she talked about how she didn't feel free to grieve even in the church.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I thought all of that was really powerful because whenever something happens, people have these sayings, everything happens for a reason. It's almost like there's like a little book of things you say whenever things are going badly. And she had a hard time grieving and grieved longer than other people thought she should. And they, of course, they gave their examples, and some of them, their mothers were still living, and she had some very choice words for some of the people.
And you know what? I thought when she said that, I was like, that right there, because I wanted to say that to people when my mother passed away. I wanted to say, B word, you still got your mama. Come talk to me when she gone.
And she admitted that those relationships, never recovered. She's never spoken to those people before. But I thought that was really honest. Like, that's how she felt in that moment. And it was, from someone, fortunately my mother's still here. But that was good for me to hear, because I just say I can't relate to what you're going through. Because I do think people mean well. They say things that are actually very disrespectful for people who are grieving. And so just saying that you don't know what to say is better than some of these platitudes that we offer to people who are grieving. And that's just something in the church that we need to realize. Everyone grieves differently. People deal with their trauma differently.
Yeah.
And if someone, is, really suffering, that you can give them a Bible scripture, but sometimes they need more than that. We've talked about needing therapy and needing Jesus.
Yeah.
And that's just something we need to talk about, because, I think I gave this example online. I think when it comes to mental health, people think that you can pray everything away, like prayer is the answer. And I think I do think prayer can be the answer, but it doesn't have to mean prayer by itself.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you can do nothing else. And I gave an example as if someone got hit by a car, you wouldn't just look at them bleeding in the middle of the street and say, I'm gonna pray for you. You would go call 911 and help that person stop bleeding. But when it comes to other things, we offer nothing but a prayer and a thought. And we need to come better than that.
Yeah. Ladies, I don't know if y'all realize this, but we have gone over the time. I really would like for each of you to just, anything else that you want to share about the book and what it did for you. I think I've said pretty much a lot, but anything else you want to share about how you felt about the book?
I have to say, I agree with Erica. I felt the same sentiments. I'm coming out of a grieving period. I just lost my dad in September. And so I really found myself resonating with Candice, because I found a place where, like, you can't, spiritual bypass is what it's called, spiritual bypassing. And I felt like that is what she held people accountable for. It's like, you spiritual bypass everything I just said, everything I just experienced. And so I appreciated her doing that, because it helped me as a person and as a preacher to be able to say I'm not alone. Like, there are other people out here that question God, that tell people to shut up, like, this don't make no sense and don't say it to me anymore. And I do also appreciate her role of her friends in this, that were honest. Um, and it's not necessarily a model, but it does provide another example of how Black women can be there for each other. So I do appreciate her for doing that.
Yes. Anything else for you, Erica?
Just to piggyback, she talked about I think her spiritual care squad is what she called them, and that's really a model that we could all use, even outside the church. Just giving a group of people around you that you trust, that your mama would approve of.
Yep.
Because they can hold you accountable. And I'm not going to get into all her accountability partners, because sometimes her accountability partners, they were holding people accountable for things that really weren't in their place. Just think about her friend that she was trying to pray the gay away while she was hopping in and out of bed.
Yeah.
But there's so many parts in the book that are kind of radical, and there may be parts you don't agree with, but I still think it's a good read. There may be parts you don't agree with, but you ain't got to throw the baby out with the dish.
I'm coming. In trouble.
Oh, you in trouble?
Yeah, I'm in trouble. But yeah, no, it's really, I really feel like it's a good read if you are interested in developing your own theology based on your experience and your own research. I would say this is a good place to start. I think it's a great place to start, and I think it's a great book, and I can't wait to see what she's going to write next, because she's made some mention of the fact that she is writing, she's preparing for the next book. So also, I want to say this before we end. I want to thank both of you, because if I had a spiritual care squad, the both of you would be on it. So I really appreciate your honesty and your always showing up for me. Y'all two do. So, and there'll be some more stuff coming. And Erika, we're going to get together about that podcast that we're going to do. And Angellica, I know that we'll be doing some other things, and I hope that you two will stay connected and do some things, because I'm not really going to be doing Hoodlums anymore. So I've already kind of said that that's I'm gonna put that in the can, and if it comes up another time, maybe so. But Erika and I will be doing a podcast together as yet to be named podcast we'll be doing together, and we will definitely have some information on that. So thank you so much for listening to our talk about this awesome book. Yeah, there we go. We can see her. Yeah, it's Red Lip Theology by Candice Marie Benbow. I give the book a 10. I think it was a great read. So this is Diva, Delivered, Inspired, Victorious, Anointed. Thank you for tuning in, and we out.